All Things Conceivable, a surrogacy podcast with Nazca Fontes.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back. You know how much I love sharing the incredible stories of our amazing surrogates. I mean, these are women who are truly some of the most generous humans you'll ever meet. And today, I'm so honored to introduce you to Stacy, who is right now embarking on her her third surrogacy journey. Stacy's story is unfolding with heart, resilience, inspiration, and from becoming a mom in 2017 to the moment she first felt called to surrogacy, to navigating the ups and downs of multiple journeys, she is walking through challenges, building lifelong bonds with intended parents, and living what her husband lovingly calls her, quote, superpower. We'll talk to Stacy about how she first brought up surrogacy with her husband, how her faith and her own experiences with infertility shape her why, and the deep relationships she is building not only with her intended parents, but also with their extended families. She opens up about the joys and setbacks along the way, what it's like to explain surrogacy to a classroom of curious kids, and how she practices self-care to stay grounded. But most of all, Stacy shows how one woman's generosity can ripple far beyond parents, reaching grandparents, siblings, and even the next generation. Stacy, welcome. Let's start at the beginning, okay? So first tell our audience what it was like for you when you first became a mom back in 2017.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My husband and I knew we wanted to have a family. Right before we got married, he said he would prefer just to have one child. So I said, as long as I can experience motherhood, that works for me. So you mentioned my faith, a lot of prayer. Later, we got pregnant in 2015. And very early on, about 6 or 7 weeks, something just didn't feel right. And we went for the ultrasound, and unfortunately there was no heartbeat. So we had a miscarriage, after about a week before being, told that we were pregnant and all of that. And so, I didn't really put too much into it, but my husband was just devastated, because in an instant you see the word pregnant on, a pregnancy test, your doctor confirms it with the blood work. And then a week later, it's like, no, you're not. So it was really heartbreaking, and he was really devastated by the whole thing, and actually started to talk to people about it. And people were like, oh yeah, my wife had a miscarriage and all of that. And so when we got pregnant in 2017, it was like the most joyous, wonderful thing that we had really ever experienced as a couple together. It all happened so fast. It was such a wonderful experience. I had, God bless, a beautiful pregnancy. Everywhere I went, kind of did a hair flip because people were like, oh my God, you look so good. I'm like, oh, thank you. So I just really loved pregnancy. I mean, just the thought of growing life, like the way that the female body handles all of it and does all of it. I was like, this is such a miracle. And then when we had our daughter, I, couldn't even imagine anything else more. Like, my heart grew 3 sizes like the Grinch. I just couldn't even believe this kind of love. And, even when we were in the room minutes before we gave birth and she was here, my husband, I'll never forget. I wish it had a photographer or somebody taking a video in the room, but he looked at me and said, are you ready for this? And I was like, ready or not, she's coming. So, and it was just such an incredible thing. Our whole family was waiting in the waiting room, extended family, cousins, like everybody was just so excited to meet her. We suffered a loss in our family about a week later with the passing of my grandfather. And just what an incredible light my daughter got to be for everybody was just so special. And so for me, I was like, man, motherhood, it is something special, and parenthood, really in general. But I also continued to remember what that loss felt like and just how lucky I was that I was given an opportunity to be a mother and her mom, more than anything. But during my pregnancy, because I loved it so much, I had just kind of said in passing, I'll totally be a surrogate because we only want one kid. And a few people in my life remembered I'd said that and kind of like put it in the back of their brain and then brought it up in 2020. I, had just started working as a general manager at a health club that I worked for. And my mentor, who was my boss when I was pregnant with my daughter, said, "Remember when you said you wanted to be a surrogate? Well, a friend of ours just did it. You should do it." I was like, yeah, maybe I'll look into it. And literally that day, I spoke with my friend and I sent a link to Conceivabilities and got a call later that day. And I was like, I should probably talk to my husband about this. We should probably revisit, me saying that if he even remembers that I said it. And when I came home, I brought it up and he was like, "I thought that was just something you mentioned and you get over it." I was like, "Well, now it's like come up and it could be a real thing." And he was like, "Yeah, let's look into it." And now here we are almost 5 years later.
And embarking on your third journey in
Yes.
5 years. I mean, what an incredible story. Of course, you heard me chuckle. I couldn't help it, but just, hey, I went down, the primrose path of even contacting the agency before ever having this conversation with my husband. And, that's really what I want to kind of get at a little bit because, we've done recordings and shows where we've talked about, gosh, having the conversation with your partner, getting him to, neutral, if not yes. And it seems like you kind of worked a little bit backwards. So, let's share with our listeners, how did that first conversation with your husband go? What was his first reaction?
At first he said, "I mean, if you really think this is necessary." And I said, "I mean, is it ever?" But again, how we feel about our daughter and just the light that she brought into the world when she was born. Imagine doing that for other people. And he was kind of like, "I mean, I guess." And, then we just went through the process and met some incredible people, along the way that, of course, I requested my second journey and, aren't maybe in that situation anymore. So weren't able to be with us for the third journey, but just the incredible and amazing people that we have met along the way that speak so passionately about, surrogacy and family building. And it's just kind of become something that is just a part of our life and who we are as a family. And then the second time he was kind of like, there's just some risk. You're older now. And I said, "Yeah, but you said literally when the babies come out," he's like, "I can't believe you just did that. That was unbelievable." And, as you mentioned in the opening, my superpower, as he calls it. And so, every time the conversation gets a little bit longer and a little bit of wait time because he wants to think about it. But, ultimately he's like, "If this is your decision, we want to back you and we will support you and, be there. So if you really feel like this is a calling for you," and I do, I feel like it's been placed on my heart. I'm not changing the world working in retail. I work in retail now. I go to work every day trying to help people look and feel their best. But to do something like this, like really, I get to kind of walk around with a badge of almost like heart, that we help people build a family that they have longed for and they have wished for, just like we did at one point. And so, for me, the conversation, the time frame kind of expands a little bit, but it always comes back to him saying, "If this is on your heart and this is really where you want to go and what you want to do, like we're in." So I'm very lucky that I have a really supportive partner that's ready to jump in with me and be the good dad friend and, meet the new family. And so that's been really, I'm blessed. It's been really special.
What an incredible message for a husband to send his wife, that, if he understood that this was placed on your heart, and just the acknowledgement, acceptance, and embracing that, yes, you're a unit as man and wife, but you're also separate beings in this world. And he acknowledged and accepted that this was a calling. And how beautiful is that? And you also shared too that your faith played a really important role in your decision to become a surrogate. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, my husband and I, we moved to where we currently live in the Chicagoland area in 2020. We found our forever home, as we believe it. And, we're in a great school system for our daughter, who is 7.5. And we really wanted to find a church that we could grow in. So we have an incredible church community and family. We, lead a small group every week with other families with younger children, so we can do life together. But, for us, it's just been constant prayer and constant support. Of course we get that from our families and our parents. Everybody in our families on both sides, the people I work with in every journey that I've been on, have been very uplifting and, surround us with the biggest hug. But, really our faith family has been a huge walk alongside us, that we see them every week. And so every week they're always adding, let's pray for your, doctor's appointment or your blood work or your trip. I just took a trip out west for my medical workup for my third journey. Always checking in and just being, again, alongside us on this journey. Because when they say it takes a village, they're not joking and they're not kidding with that. So we've really leaned into that notion and just been very focused on prayer. You also mentioned it in the opening. My second journey, I did have some trials and some struggles. It took us 3 transfers, and it was I just felt every step of the way there's a reason. And I just prayed about it and constantly just gave it to the Lord, if I can say that, and just really just leaned into, I know that there's a plan for me and that there's a plan for this family that we're partnering with and we're doing life with right now. And it all worked itself out. And it's funny because I just started a new job. I found out on April 29th of last year that I was pregnant, and I went into work and my boss was like, I just found out I'm pregnant. Well, didn't just find out, but hey, I'm just telling people I'm 20 weeks pregnant. So I'll be going on leave soon. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just found out this morning that I'm pregnant. And, of course she knew about my surrogacy journey, and again, super supportive from the rip, which was so special. But it all just worked out perfectly because I got to take off holiday and just put my feet up on Christmas and not have to work retail. And so I thought, this is the reason. I've walked alongside this family and I've prayed about it, and this was it. But, all jokes aside, it just, instead of getting down about it, I just leaned into my faith and just knew that God had a plan for us. And, when it all kind of unfolded and worked out, what an incredible Christmas gift for the family that was able to take that little girl home, and an incredible way to start 2025. So just really, and again, just such a joyous time of year with the holidays and Christmas, and just such a beautiful time to go through that with them and to give them their little baby.
I love all of that. I love that you just had a lot of faith. Some would call it confidence. Some would call it belief, that we're going to pull from whatever power, right, sort of inspires our journey in life. And, you leaned in and pulled on your faith. Even during the times when it didn't quite work out so well, right? Not only did you go through 3 transfers with your first journey, it was also with your second set of intended parents that you had to be matched with, because the first ones didn't work out. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So actually my first journey, the 3 transfers was with my second journey. So just the most recent, but my first journey, we were partnered with a family. We both said literally in the first 10 minutes that we wanted to work together. And about 3 months in, minutes before signing our legal paperwork, they said that they needed me to do a few things that at the time my husband and I just weren't really willing to bend on. So we had to break match. And again, this is the beginning of my journey. I signed on in December of 2020. This is January of 2021. We get matched April of 2021. I was devastated. And we just talked through it as a family, and, again, leaned into, this just isn't the right path, and we will find a different one. And within weeks, I was matched with the family that we carried our sweet little boy, who just turned 3 actually last week. But we were matched with them, and I don't know. I don't really know if I think it would have worked out any other way. Would I have done a second or now third journey? They are just the most incredible family. They have a daughter via surrogate as well. Even at our doctor's appointments would be like, oh, we just love her. She's a part of our family now. And, but in the beginning it was hard. I was sad and I felt like defeated that this match didn't work. This family didn't want to work with us. But again, within weeks, we found our new intended parents. And we still talk. I get pictures. And again, my sweet little guy turned 3 last week. And he's thriving. He's hilarious. And he's just the missing piece to their puzzle. And so I'm so blessed that I was able to gift them that and him for their life. And so, but that was hard. And, we went for our journey for the embryo transfer in September of 2021. We actually had to fly to Colorado and found out the day before my transfer, I had COVID. I had no symptoms. They were like, we're really sorry, we can't do the transfer. So my husband, myself, and my daughter, who I think was 4 at the time, we had to drive back to the Chicagoland area, which was hard. And my intended mother was just, oh, I feel terrible. I'm like, what can you do? What happens? But then when we went in January of 22, that transfer was successful. And, I will tell this story really quickly. It was really just a luck of faith. And again, a lot of prayer, up until the transfer in early of January of 2022. Our doctor who we'd worked with, and the reason they picked the clinic in Colorado, he was not going to be present for the transfer. So a lot of just air out of our sails. And so it was like, oh man, okay. But the morning I got there, I went by myself this time just to go get done and come home. He was there and they said, oh, he'll be in a few minutes. And I was like, the doctor that we work with is here? Because I was told he wasn't coming. And they said, no, he's here. And I was like, can I call my intended mother? And she screamed, she cried. She was so happy. And I mean, he is such a hoot. So, it just, again, God's plan, everything lining up so perfectly, and it was such a great, wonderful ending to kind of a tough start. But the transfer worked. We got pregnant. And again, we had that baby at the end of September of 2022. And he is doing incredible.
What an amazing story. And I so appreciate you talking about some of the challenges that arise that are inherent with surrogacy. I think we rarely find a journey that is seamless, right? And smooth without hiccups. It's just, we're all human beings. We have lives, we have schedules. It's biology. Things come up, illness, setbacks. So I love to hear how surrogates cope with these challenges. Some lean into faith, some, just identify that it's all part of, the greater universe, a plan, par for the course. So, I think that's really important and necessary when considering whether or not to become a surrogate is, what is having that self-reflection of what is my fiber? What am I made of? How resilient am I in the face of challenges and setbacks? So thank you for sharing those, because demonstrating how you shared your own resiliency or demonstrated your own resiliency is so important for our listeners. And, now that you're embarking on a third, you've got, journey 1, journey 2 to reflect on and the differences. So how about just sharing with us, pick 2 of the main differences between each of those journeys and, what it was like to experience those differences.
So the first thing I'll say is every relationship is so different. In the beginning, I felt like my second journey was a little bit more business, which is fine. I want to respect boundaries and, whatever the family is looking for in that moment and in that relationship. But I'll tell you, we talk to our second intended parents every month on the 27th, which is, the month birthday of our sweet little girl. But I think really understanding that the relationships are going to be different, and that's okay. Because at first I struggled with it a little bit, and now it's just organically become this relationship and friendship that is real and is authentic. And we talk about football in our group chat, and the different cities that we live in and just how things are going and, just the growing of the little girl that we just gave birth to in December. But I think it's just really leaning into knowing the relationships are going to be different and that's okay. And I think the other thing, because with this last one, a lot of people asked me when the transfers kept failing in the beginning. And, in the beginning, I didn't get very emotional because I was just kind of like, it just happened and that's what it is. I did all the right things. I'm not going to beat myself up. And knowing getting emotional is okay, because the second failed transfer, I became very emotional. I was at work when I found out that the blood work was negative, and I was with a friend. And I just burst into tears and cried for a little while and had such an incredible, my girlfriend Jeanette, who I worked with, was so amazing in just being there for me and being my support and my pillar when I needed a leaning post. And I think realizing that you're feeling the loss too, and it's okay. But not one thing I was super intentional about was not letting myself feel like this is my fault. I did something that caused me to not get pregnant. As long as you follow the protocols and you listen to your body, that's really the best you can do. And again, to your point, science and biology is going to happen and you're just the vessel. But I think just really not letting myself get down on myself, but also letting myself feel emotion, because I'm feeling the loss too. I'm feeling the sadness and the letdown for my intended parents who I've grown a relationship with. But I think, again, having people around you that are going to keep you up and let you shed your tears when you need to has been so important for us. And in the moment that I needed it was really just so well received and appreciated. But I think those 2 or 3 things there. Yeah.
That's important to recognize and understand. Every relationship will be different. But more importantly, I really respect that you are standing up and saying surrogates have a lot of emotion and investment in this too.
Yeah.
Because I think, certainly from the inside of an agency, looking out and supporting surrogates in their journeys, like we understand this. But I think externally in the world, when they think about an intended parent and surrogate relationship, there could be the possibility, right, that loss and setbacks are more the purview of intended parents, right? They're the ones dealing and grappling with the emotions surrounding those. And that's just not the case. I believe that they're equally shared by the surrogate and her partner as well. Would you agree that also your husband maybe felt some of these emotions surrounding the setbacks and the loss?
Yeah, he really leaned into making sure I felt like this isn't my fault. And I was very big on that because I worked with a clinic that was like, no chocolate, no caffeine of any kind. You can't even drink decaf coffee. And I did all the things for every single round of IVF that I've ever done, even not working with that clinic anymore. So he really leaned into making sure I knew I did the best I could. I took care of myself. I rested. I made the trek to, both clinics that I've worked with so far have been out of state. This third one is as well. And just really making sure I felt just his love and just support behind me. And he, again, was very, I'm here, but I know you've got it. Thankfully, I've never struggled from postpartum of any kind, but really just for him wanting to make sure I don't go into a dark place and feel the defeat and carry it with me, because again, there was nothing I could have done. It is biology, it is science, and we're kind of just praying it sticks, and you can eat the greasy French fries when it's over and, do all the little remedies that they say, but really it's going to happen if it's going to happen. And so he was just very big on being next to me, making sure that I kept my head up and that I felt good about the place I was in. Because again, I've never really struggled with any of that. So he just wanted to make sure I continued forward as opposed to letting myself move backward.
And Stacy, was your husband's relationship with the set of intended parents different from your relationship with them?
I mean, we have a group chat with all of the parents normally, and then usually I have one with just the intended mother. But I mean, a little different because it wasn't as hands-on, but lately I'm not even responding in the group chat. We're talking about, football right now. And so the dads are kind of leading the group chat, which is kind of funny. But I would say it's a little different. Obviously, I feel like when moms get, to talking, it's like a kitchen party conversation. But he is very involved in really the whole journey for both of my journeys. He has been, which has been really fun because, my husband works in the healthcare industry. And so he's very good at connecting with people. So to watch him walk with me through this and be in it with the parents and high-fiving the dad in the delivery room when all is said and done, it is cool to kind of see, because in the beginning he was kind of hesitant, I would say, just to be in a group chat. When I told him, hey, I'm going to start a group chat, he was like, okay. And, now he's the one driving the group chat from the second, family that we just cared for. So, I would say it's different, but it's equally as just organically formed and authentic at this point.
And, but I mentioned earlier that this has had a ripple effect, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just the impact that you and your husband have had on, bringing life into the world and converting intended parents to parents, mm-hmm. Or growing a family by, giving the gift of a sibling. So, share with us a little bit about the joy you've brought into the world of the grandparents and the siblings and that ripple effect. I'm sure that our listeners would love to hear more about that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And, that's one thing my husband, when we talk about it, especially maybe like a week or two leading up to delivery, when we're kind of getting ready and making sure that we know when we have to be at the hospital, because we did induction for both of these first two journeys. So the parents coming from out of town knew when they had to be here so they wouldn't miss, the birth. But our first intended family, again, has a daughter from a previous surrogate who was just about a year younger than my daughter. So when we would get together, our girls would play together and it was just so special. But, growing that family so that, that little girl could have a sibling and have a little brother. They've been to our home and we've been to their home. They live out of state when we've traveled. But just, seeing the pictures on social media, because we are, all friends on social media, but seeing the pictures and the big family, setups and, the intended father, or the father, he's not intended anymore, but the father, his family lives where they live. And the mother, her family actually lives in Chicago. So it's just been really cool to watch him become a character in the family and be a part of what they're doing. And again, he is so hilarious and he has such a big personality. It's so awesome to see through pictures and videos, that we send back and forth. And then with our newer family, she is an addition to our, parents that got together later in life. The mother has two older boys, and to watch them now welcome a new baby, they're kind of like, what do we do with this in the beginning? But just knowing that they are loving, being a big brother and being in their big brother era. But also the joy that the grandparents on both sides are feeling. The father of the little girl that we just carried, he's an only child. And so to be able to give his mother a granddaughter, really a grandchild, but a granddaughter of all things. My mom, the relationship she has with my daughter as her only grandchild, and it gets to be a granddaughter, is incredible. And the magnitude of that special relationship, it's incredible to even be around, but knowing that we just gave that to a family. And his mother lives close to them out east. And so she gets to spend a ton of time and be with her. And then, the mother's family, they live just a couple hours away, but they're also loving being back into grandparents of a little baby. And so just to talk to them and hear just the excitement and just like love, just rejuvenated kind of baby love back in their families is just so awesome. And I mean, we've just welcomed a new baby in our family a couple of months ago. And man, the life that shoots into every corner is so incredible. And just, I feel like shifts everyone's perspective in a family, no matter the dynamic, if you've got older kids or younger kids, but just the joy and just pure, just bliss that a new baby brings, and to know that we were a part of that. And then in the long term, this baby maybe will find a partner and hopefully grow their life with somebody. Maybe they're going to have kids, and, those kids wouldn't have been possible had we not. And so I think just thinking about all of the layers, and the ripple of this, it's just so cool to step back and be like, man, because we said yes, look at what's going to happen in this life for this family. So that's the best part of the whole thing, I think.
Indeed, it's very profound, and people on the outside of surrogacy, fail to understand this naturally. They're not connected to it. They just see the immediate match and the results of that. And, once you start peeling it back and you understand just how deep this goes, and as you say, the ripple effect of it is, the magnitude is enormous.
Yeah.
And, in my years of managing this journey for hundreds upon hundreds of people, one of the facets that I like to illuminate for everybody was this notion of the concept and the teaching of compassion for the younger children that are adjacent to the surrogacy journey. So in this case, it would be your daughter, right? And the teaching of compassion and empathy and giving and love and generosity that really, you're planting a seed that you hope will grow and flourish for the rest of her life. And, you also brought the concept of surrogacy into her classroom. So
I did.
How about sharing with us a little bit about not only what I mentioned about the teachings of surrogacy in her young life, but, bringing it into a classroom of 6 and 7-year-olds?
Yeah. So last year I got to be, she was student of the week, and I got to be the special guest reader. So every day they have something, for that student. And I got to pick a book. We're huge Office fans. So we have an Office Kids book, and I brought that to read. We decided on it together. And, I get to talk a little bit about what I like with the kids. And so that was one thing I talked about. And then at the end, they get to ask questions. They can ask how Finley was when she was a baby and what we like to do as a family. But one of the kids yelled out, well, Finley is going to have a baby sister or brother soon. And I looked at the teacher and said, can I explain to them what we're doing? Because of course my daughter blurted out, we're not keeping it. And I was like, okay. So, we kind of reined it in a little bit, and I, as best as I could, explained that, sometimes there are moms and dads that can't have a baby on their own, and they need a little bit of science, and they need a friend who can help them with that. And that's what we're doing. And they said, so whose baby is it? And I said, well, it's their baby, and the doctors use science to put it together, and then they put it inside my belly, and I carry it, and I help it grow and take care of it. And then we go to the hospital, and then the baby comes out, and they get to take it home, and they're a family. And so then they, the questions of a 6 and 7-year-old, well, where does the baby go? And, all that. I'm like, well, we don't have to get in all that, but it's in there, so just even because all the parents, we go to a really great small little school. So all the parents knew what I was doing, because every time they're like, oh, you're expecting. I'm like, well, not exactly, because I just love to bring awareness to surrogacy and talk about it. I love, my husband and I, whenever we go out to dinner and I'm pregnant, he loves nothing more, especially when, there's an older couple or an older restaurant manager. We like to go to places that were referred by, family. My uncle is in the restaurant industry. So we went to a restaurant one time in downtown Chicago, and the older man came to the manager came to the table, brought us shots, and was like, oh, thank you for coming. And I was like, well, I can't have any. We're expecting. And he was like, oh, congratulations, Dad. And my husband loves to say, I'm not the father, and see what happens and the freak out that ensues. But just to, again, bring awareness to a perfect stranger and tell him, actually, this is what we're doing. And we talk about surrogacy, and most people actually say, I've never met someone who's done this before. And then I say, well, now you have, and you should talk about it with more people. So, for me, it's just cool to talk about and bring awareness, because I love when people say you're the first surrogate I've ever met. And then I'll usually say, I hope I'm not the last. But, I think bringing it to a group of kids, even an older generation, I still remember when I told my grandmother, who has since, gone to heaven, but I still remember how scared I was to tell her, because I just think the older generation sometimes doesn't understand. And they, they've not gone through IVF or things like that. So when I sat her down to tell her, she actually cried, and I was nervous it was going to be followed with kind of I can't believe you're doing this. But it was a warm, I can't believe you're doing that for somebody, kind of next sentence. And, so to just from the top of my family, and the oldest generation feel that up into a group of six-year-olds, and just be like, wow, that's so cool. Science is cool. And it's like, yeah, it is. So really from the youngest generation to the oldest, feeling that open-mindedness and that love has just been the most rewarding, I think. And again, bringing awareness to it is really why I think I love talking about it.
Well, you are such an incredible advocate.
Thank you.
What an amazing voice in the surrogate community. And I love all the points that you touched upon, how, having a great partner by your side who believes in you, to normalizing it for, not only the older generation, but for the younger generation, and all of the lessons that you've learned, and the way that you've demonstrated how relationships are different. They move, they shift, they grow, they change. I mean, there's just so much in the world of surrogacy that you've helped bring to life and to light for everybody that hears your voice.
Oh, thank you.
I just am so impressed by your generosity and your love for those around you, and for your willingness to bring new life into the world, Stacy. You are truly an exemplary surrogate in our community, and I hope our listeners really understand that it's women like you who make this journey possible for other surrogates and for intended parents. If I were to ask you, there's so much I want to ask you, but time is limited. But let me wrap up by saying, if I were to ask you to share, one nugget of information or inspiration to a woman listening to this who might want to become a surrogate, or for an intended parent who's really nervous about what type of women become surrogates, what would you share with them?
I think I would just say to the women that are questioning it as becoming a surrogate, there is nothing like, having a baby. There's nothing like hearing that little cry for the first time and knowing when you look over and you see those parents, just so special. The most, besides the day I married my husband and the day that my daughter was born, 2 memories in my life, the third to come, that I will carry with me on my heart, in my veins forever, was birthing a baby for somebody else and creating a family and watching love grow instantly. My goodness. And if you are a parent, a possible intended parent who's wondering, I don't know if I would do this with anybody else. Conceivabilities has been such an incredible partner for me, and the people and specifically the women that I've got to walk alongside and have supported me through my journey. I don't think it gets better, knowing that it's not a match isn't put together by a computer. It's put together with love and intention and people sitting together, really finding the right people for the right people, I think is what gets me every time, and what I would encourage for people that are thinking about it, working with somebody or an agency that really takes the time, the care, and the love to find you the right person, and knowing that it all falls into place after that.
The beautiful, the magical, the superwoman that is Stacy. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're incredible and an inspiration to us all.
Thank you. And I am so happy to talk to you today. What an incredible organization that you've built. And I'm so blessed to have, stumbled upon Conceivabilities and been a part of your journey as well with the agency. So thank you for what you've done in bringing this incredible organization to light.
With pleasure. Well, I am pretty speechless, folks, but I'm going to have to share my aha moment nevertheless. And what an incredible person Stacy is. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to her. And I think when I reflect on the conversation, which could have gone on for hours because she's so interesting, my biggest takeaway from my interaction with her is just an acknowledgement that whatever our belief system is and whatever it is that we draw from to gather strength and conviction and belief in a cause, whether it's inward, whether it's outward, leaning into that belief, drawing strength from it, and acting upon it demonstrates that life can truly be magical. Thank you so much, listeners, and until next time, take good care.
Thanks for listening. At Conceivabilities, we believe everyone who dreams of becoming a parent deserves that chance. And it's strong, compassionate women who make it possible. With 30 years of experience building families, Conceivabilities has seen firsthand the incredible impact surrogates make. Women, like our surrogates, are a powerful force for change, uplifting families, strengthening communities, and proving that when women empower women, anything is possible. Becoming a surrogate is more than a journey. It's a chance to make a lasting impact. Learn more about surrogacy at conceivabilities.com, because when the match is right, dreams come true.